Okay, I want to begin here today by seeing if I can let you inside the mind of a therapist so you know how I think. Actually, there's some folks that'll say, "Hey, Carter, what goes on inside that brain of yours?" And I don't know that they're really asking that in a real complimentary kind of way, but that's a different subject. Anyway, when I'm counseling with people and I'm listening to their stories, I'm watching for trends and tendencies and patterns that those people might have. Because typically, if somebody comes into my office and they say, well, I have an anger issue, or I have problems with anxiety, or I get caught up in my defenses too easily, I find out that this is not just a sometimes kind of a thing, but very often it's something they've been doing for decades. And they tend to have the same kind of reactions over and over. And as they're sitting in my office, they know that it's not really a good thing, but it becomes part of their dysfunction. And the way I describe it is many times you can have your emotional responses, and it's like going back to an old friend that you know is not all that good of an influence on you, but they're familiar. And so you keep going back to that old friend because, well, that person's been in your life for a long time. So many times, let's just take anger for an example. Many times you can have that old friend, Mr. Anger over there, and when a difficult situation comes along, you go consult Mr. Anger, and Mr. Anger says, yeah, just blow all over everybody in your emotional sense. Or you can have that old friend, Mr. Anxiety, and you begin thinking, well, I've been hanging around with Mr. Anxiety for a long time. I guess that's what I'll do again because that's just what I always do. Now, consciously, you may not be saying that to yourself, but subconsciously, that tends to be what you find yourself doing. There are times when I'll ask, when is the earliest time that you remember responding in the emotions that you do? And people will say, I've been doing it ever since I was a child, or for as long as I've been married to this person, or as long as I've been in this work environment. And most people will see that it's just been an ongoing thing. Now, really, it comes down to one very, very large question when we try to break into these cycles, and that is, how fervently do you want to change? Or perhaps another way we can put it, how strong is your sense of resolve? Because I'll have people that'll say, I need to stop being so angry. Okay, that's a good thought. Or I need to quit responding with so much insecurity or anxiety. All right, I like that. How strong is your sense of resolve? Now, a lot of people say, I've been trying for a long time, but nothing seems to work. But often it just comes down to how much sense of concentration they have and how much of a sense of determination there is going to be as they engage in their future. So I'd like to give you 6 different keys that can help you break some of these dysfunctional and lousy patterns of emotional management so that you can go on and get beyond that and get to a much cleaner, healthier way of living. And your patterns are going to be much more conducive to a successful life. Now, the first thing I want you to consider is make sure you identify your most common trigger points to your emotional reactions. More often than not, most of us tend to have very similar kinds of scenarios that set us up for the responses we don't like. For example, if somebody responds to you in a bossy kind of way, and before you know it, you're acting in rebellion. Or if somebody is easily critical, or if somebody ignores you, or if somebody piles too much chores on top of you, you have certain responses. And it's a matter of saying, slow down. I need to realize these are some tendencies, or these are some common scenarios that I'm probably going to see again and again and again. Am I required to go back and respond with my old friend anger or anxiety or defensiveness? Or when these trigger moments come, who do I want to be in those moments? And it's very important for you to be specific with yourself. For example, if you know you're going to be visiting with a family friend and that person just gets all over you because they're such a difficult person, am I required to continue back in my old patterns like I always have been? Or is there something different? So be very aware of what your trigger moments are so they don't sneak up on you. Now, a second thing, solicit or elicit input from people who know you best regarding your emotional reactions. Now, what I mean by that is there are some people, I hope, that know you pretty well and have been around you for quite some time, and you can ask, when you see me becoming angry, for example, or when you see me go into my anxiety mode, what is it that you pick up on in me that that concerns you? And now that's a pretty vulnerable kind of question for you to ask. But hopefully that other person can give you some honest input, and they might say something like, well, I feel like you overreact, or I feel like you put way too much credence in what that other person's doing, or it seems to me like you go way too far trying to make that other person change, or you over-explain yourself. Now, what I'm hoping to do by suggesting this is I'm hoping you can develop a sense of empathy regarding the people surrounding you when you're in the midst of your emotional exchange. Sometimes your emotions can blind you to how others feel, and so as you begin realizing, others have responses to me, I can learn from that. And the more I empathize with how I come across and how other people perceive me, then the greater I'm going to be able to make the adjustments that would be necessary. Now, a third ingredient for that change process is identify your cleaner alternatives. As you identify your trigger points, as you understand how you come across to people and how people receive you, I'm hoping you can begin thinking, I can do better. There are different ways that I can manage myself. Again, I'll go back to that angry person. I really have, I know there are moments when I have my anger, and let's even give you credit and say, yeah, there are moments when it's a legitimate emotion. But I don't need to go off as hard as I do. My cleaner alternative would be to state my convictions with calmness and then quietly hold to my resolve rather than getting suckered into circular arguments. That would be an example of what I'm talking about. Or that person that goes into the high defense mode. They can decide, I'll explain myself once, and I don't need to continue to justify over and over and over. I know what my cleaner alternatives are, and as I identify that and I attach that to my trigger moments, then I'm going to go into a different mode. Now, a fourth thing that we can say is, and that is, you'll probably need to rehearse in advance how you're going to respond when those triggers come. I wish that every time that a difficult situation comes along, you could have 5 minutes, just 5 minutes of rehearsal time. Okay, in 5 minutes, this person's going to say and do this. Now I want you to think about your reaction. Well, it just doesn't work that way. And so in your quiet moments, in your moments of personal reflection, you want to ask, when I do get triggered by people and events and circumstances, whether it's when I'm in traffic or when I'm with this difficult person at work or in an extended family situation, how am I going to respond next time based on what I'm already learning within myself? And so take your notions and don't just intellectualize them. Think about those adjustments in a very pragmatic kind of way. And then number 5, as you're going through your change process, it's always good to have somebody that can keep you accountable. So make yourself accountable to people that you trust. As an example, if you have a best friend or a family member that's pulling for you and they're with you, let them know. My goal is to minimize my anger, and here's what I'm going to do. Or my goal is to minimize my defensiveness or minimize my impatience, and here's my game plan. This is what I intend to accomplish. Once you've spoken that to someone else, then it makes you that much more likely to follow through with it, as opposed to just thinking it inside your mind and just doing nothing about it. And then finally, and this is a big one, number 6, practice your cleaner alternatives in small increments of time. For example, if you decide, well, I just become way too impatient and I need to stop that. Well, rather than thinking for the rest of my life I'm going to be a patient person, identify certain moments when you know that you might be vulnerable and then give yourself an assignment. I'm going to be around this person, and I'll be there from 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock around that individual. And during that 1 hour, I'm going to practice patience. Put anything in front of me, but that's what you're going to get. You're going to get a steady, a reasonable, a patient response. Now, at 12:01, I may fall apart. I don't know. I'm not there yet. But give yourself a small increment of time and allow yourself to find those small victories, because then that can become part of an ongoing habit. So if you find yourself having these emotional responses in a long-standing pattern, realizing that it's just been a part of who you are for as long as you can remember, you can either say, well, I guess that's just me, or you can increase that sense of resolve. And with this mind awake and with this sense of determination, you can start cutting into those patterns and tell those old friends like Mr. Anger or Miss Anxiety or all that. You can tell them, you know, you've been around long enough. I'm going to someplace different. I need a better pattern of living. Now, I hope that you find videos such as this to be helpful, and I want it to stimulate your way of thinking, because the whole notion here is to help you in your growth process. I'm honored that you would allow me to be a part of that growth. By the way, beneath the video, you'll see the subscribe button. If you've not already done it, go ahead and click that. And then in addition to that, you'll see some resources, books and online workshops and online counseling possibilities that are there. And I would encourage you to go beneath that and take advantage of those. And just know that I want us to be a community where we encourage one another. Keep in mind my little motto now. Dr. C, DRC, stands for dignity, respect, civility. And those are ingredients that I'm working on an ongoing basis in my life, and I want you to join with me, and perhaps together we can all make a difference. That having been said, I will see you next time.